This is a homage beat.
How's it hanging, 2K heads? This is 2K Kingslayer, and we are back with another freelance tutorial. Today, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite freelances in the game, which is Horns. And it's a very dynamic and kind of weird freelance. But before we get into that, I am going to ask that you please like the video and subscribe to my channel. My goal with all these videos is to improve online gameplay, reduce cheesing, and increase sim gameplay as much as possible. So if all of that is something that you support, please like and subscribe. So as always, I'm going to be using only online gameplay for this tutorial. Some of the teams that I'm going to suggest that you guys use with the Horns freelance are the Spurs, Grizzlies, Pelicans, and Raptors. Basically any team with two dynamic big men that can pass and knock down the mid-range jump shot. So let's take a second to look at the spacing of the Horns freelance. You're going to have your two big men at the elbows, neither one are going to be in the post, and then you're going to have two wings out in the corners. I know this looks pretty weird, but if you guys follow my tips, it's going to be extremely effective. So let's get into our first tip. Set your freelance to space the floor. You're going to do this by pressing left on the D-pad and then scrolling by pressing R2. Then you're going to select the option to space the floor. What this is going to do is that your players are going to stay stationary unless you call manual actions. If you leave it on motion cuts or scoring actions, the actions that they give you are okay, but the ones we're going to be talking about today that you create yourself are much more effective. At least in my opinion. You can try both out and let me know what works best for you. My next tip is to get the ball in the high post and utilize off-ball cuts for one of your guys on the outside. It doesn't even matter who. You can utilize an off-ball cut for either the other guy on the elbow, your wing players, whoever. The reason you want to use this is because a lot of people online off-ball. They play defense on somebody besides your ball handler. Now you can call an off-ball cut by just pointing your left stick to the player that you want to cut and holding triangle, but the way I suggest you do it, because it's more accurate, is by pressing L1, then the player icon, and then L1 again. The reason this works extremely well is because if you play online, you know that 9 out of 10 players off-ball, meaning they play defense on somebody who doesn't have the ball and let the CPU defend you. This isn't going to work if you're calling off-ball cuts, because they're not going to be ready for your guy to cut out of nowhere using this Horns offense. So remember, get the ball in the high post, call for an off-ball cut. You'll get a lot of scores. My next tip is to utilize big-to-big passing. So you're still going to call for off-ball cuts in these situations, but what I like to do sometimes is get the ball to the other big first. It's something subtle, but what it can do is distract your opponent from the guy who you called for a cut. So if you pass it to the other big first, check this out. See that? Sneaky, right? My opponent wasn't ready for the cut because they were looking at me passing to the other big man and focusing on that. That's pretty basketball, and you'll actually see real NBA teams doing that all the time. Let's take a look at another example of this working. We get it to one big, call for a cut, pass to the other big, and because the cutter drove the lane there, he sucked the defense in, and Jonas Valanciunas was wide open for a nice mid-range shot. Let's try this again. We called for the cut, defense got sucked in, Serge Ibaka, wide open mid-range shot. That time we called for a cut on the other big. That was really nice. That's beautiful basketball. Very Spurs-like basketball. So I think you guys get the point. Big-to-big passing is a critical element of this Horns freelance offense. Okay, on to tip number 4, and here is one that I actually have not seen recommended in any other Horns tutorials thus far. Calling opposite elbow pick and rolls. Well, what do I mean by that? So what I like to do is bring my ball up the court with my point guard and move to one side of the court, right? So that time I move to the left side. What you're gonna do is call a pick and roll from the guy who is on the opposite elbow, not the opposite corner, but the opposite elbow. You're gonna see that you're gonna end up getting a lot of really successful pick and rolls off of this action just because of the way the spacing is in the Horns freelance. They actually adjust. See, watch what happens. As I'm calling this pick and roll, my guys are moving out of the way. They adjusted for the pick and roll there, and in this situation, we pass the ball around until we get a foul. So again, opposite elbow pick and rolls is one of the most critical and effective manual actions that you're going to get in this Horns Freelance. And finally, tip number 5 is something that I found to be a really fun way to use the horn spacing, and that is by posting up your wings. So right now you can see I'm using the Raptors, and we know that DeMar DeRozan is actually a pretty decent post player. He can drive and finish at the rim, like right there. Ooh, that's nasty. And he can also hit the turnaround. The spacing in horns works really well because, kind of like what I just showed you with that pick and roll, they clear out of the way for you. See that? If you post up with your wings, they clear out of the way for you. Oh, and you can do that! Disgusting. Nasty. Ugh. So that's my 5th tip. Guys, it seems really simple. I know it seems very simplistic, but these really work. I won several games doing mostly just this, so leave your requests for any future freelances or money plays that you would like for me to do in the comments section below. And just one last reminder to please like the video and subscribe if you support this kind of thing and if this was helpful to you at all. Today I hit 666 subscribers, so Illuminati confirmed, I guess. Yeah, but please like the video, subscribe, and I will be back hopefully next week. Bye!